this won't be as detailed as your description, Julia. So
Fair enough.
Here, so I've just written just a few paragraphs on the events that take place during the 2 chapters. So Aeron is a priest of the drowned god and receives news that Balon is dead. Well, first of all, he receives news that the king is dead, and he surmises that it must be Balon that the messenger is talking about, and that he died from falling from a bridge, which seems, of course, suspicious, and there are many theories about what actually went down with this falling from a bridge. But Aeron's brothers, Euron and Tyrion, and Balon's daughter, Asha, claim the Seastone share during a Kingsmoot, which, is to be decided from a Kingsmoot, and that's a meeting of all the Ironborn captains and lords to name the next king. So that's just about the summary of the first chapter. In the second chapter, the actual Kingsmoot ceremony takes place, and Aeron leads the ceremony. So various small lords step forward, and Victarion, Euron don't really want to make a claim first, because the contenders that start off first are always forgotten, or their claim is just dismissed, so they wait until the opportune moment, and Victarion is given the signal by Aeron of when it's right to make his claim. So Victarion and Asha make their claim, but then they are overshadowed by Euron's claim of possessing a horn which can bind dragons to his will, and Euron is ultimately declared the winner of the Kingsmoot. On top of that, I just want to mention this theory which I read on Westeros, and when I first read it about a year ago, it just blew my mind. I'm hoping you haven't heard it yourself, because it'll just let's start with. So it's all about the Kingsmoot, and it's talking about you can sort of use it as a predictor of the events which will take place in the books concerning the Iron Throne, and the Seastone share the contenders for the Seastone share can be used as who will sit the Iron Throne, and in the past and the future. So the first person was Gilbert Farwin, and you don't get a lot of detail on him, but there is a description that he has mad eyes, and this as an indicator of Mad King Aerys. Then the second up, Eric Ironbreak. So he is an overweight past ruler who was famous for his warhammer, and this is can be compared to Robert Baratheon, who was after Aerys on the Iron Throne. And then third was the drum. So there's not much support for this, but just basically it's Tommen and Joffrey and possibly Marcella who are rulers until the main characters of the story can show up and make their claim for the throne. So then Victarion makes his case, and he is a terrible speaker and reluctant ruler, and he is shadowed by his older brother. So this is comparison to Stannis Baratheon, who, if you follow this logic, would be the next ruler of the Iron Throne. Then the last would be Asha Greyjoy, who is a woman, and that would be a shade to Dany at one point, overthrowing Stannis, becoming the leader of the Iron Throne. And the final person to make his claim is Euron Greyjoy, and for some reason they've mentioned Bloodraven as the comparison to Euron.
Bloodraven is going to be the king at the end of it all.
You had me up until Bloodraven.
Yeah.
Well, there is a lot of similarities between, the sort of wording of the character Bloodraven and Euron Greyjoy, and they both have that one eye. Don't they both have red eyes as well, or is that, am I mixed that up?
No. Euron is just creepy.
Well, yeah. But I like that, kind of an analogy to each potential claimant. Or maybe Euron represents the others, this kind of horrible that just takes over everything at the end.
But if we're going to follow that analogy to its inevitable conclusion, we have Asha realizing that Euron isn't the legitimate king because there was this other candidate out there, Theon, who was still alive, who hadn't been allowed to participate. So maybe someone who they thought was dead but is really alive, like Jon.
Or Aegon.
Anyone?
Or Aegon.
Or oh, damn it! Either of those. So if we are to extrapolate that analogy, then that's where it's heading, I think.
Maybe. Euron can just represent the sort of in-between area where the others will be, where the others will be force and everything's going crazy.
Yeah,
and then Dany came back.
Yeah, I know that there is a theory that Dany will end up sacrificing herself during this war against the others in order to defeat them, which, I don't really... There are some characters that I'm happy to speculate about, others I'm not, and Dany's one of them that I'm just like, you know what, I'm just going to let this play out because I have no idea where it's going to go. But that's just one thing I've heard.
There is a bit of a link between Asha and Dany. They're both potentially pregnant to their sort of paramours, I guess.
I thought that Dany had something akin to possibly a miscarriage when she was out in the wastes there, hanging out with Drogon, doing her little spirit walk or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like a stillbirth or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I think what might be more relevant for Dany is that it seemed like she hadn't had anything akin to a regular menstrual cycle in a long time, which is something that is traditionally connected to being able to conceive. So that if it was the first time she'd had her period in a long time, that might mean that her body has recovered from all its trials and that she is fertile again. So that would
she actually thinks when she starts bleeding, she thinks she can't remember when was the last time she had her moon blood. So it's possible that it's an indication
this could be a
that
sign
she
of her
can
body
conceive
returning
again.
to normal functioning, so that she could conceive a child in the near future.
Okay. Well, yeah. I suppose the what was the prophecy? Her womb will quicken once all these other things happen. But sorry, getting back to Aeron. I noticed one of the things in the first chapter is this kind of magical CPR maneuver they're doing on servants of the drowned gods, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of this medieval CPR.
I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I was going to say that when I was reading it again recently, it reminded me of the scene from Hocus Pocus, where the witches just come back and they're just going around their house, and then they find Max and his sister, and he tries to escape by first using a lighter, and they think his hand is on fire, and then he sets off the fire alarm, and they all think that he's made it rain in the house and that he's magical.
Oh yeah, the idea that any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Yeah, yeah. God, all the Greyjoy brothers are so creepy. I mean, I love their chapters because they're just full on creep. Victarion, Euron, and Aeron, they're all just like so screwed up. And we have this whole theory that Euron abused Aeron as a child because he was the little one. He was defenseless. Ew, but I can't look away.
Yeah, that's the creaking door theory or something.
Yeah.
He keeps returning this creaking door and gets really distressed, which I think, it's a very simple line, but I think there's credibility to it, yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious to what I mean. Having read other literary examples of a character recalling childhood sexual abuse, I think it's pretty obvious what George is getting at there. I mean, just adding to Euron's creep factor even more.
It seems to be a theme that he uses with other siblings, like the Targaryens, and then there's the theory about Joffrey and Tommen.
What's the theory about Joffrey and Tommen? I've never heard that.
Joffrey was molesting Tommen. That's the theory.
I think it's from book 4 where Jaime's trying to comfort Tommen after he's freaking out about Tywin's dead body, and Tommen says something like, "Oh yeah, I used to go into my head when Joffrey," and then he trails off or something like that.
Oh,
he used to block it out when Joffrey would torment him.
I wouldn't put it past Joffrey.
I don't know.
He would have been bad.
Or
he could just have been hitting Tommen or something like that. I didn't have to.
I saw Joffrey more as cruel in a violent sense, but maybe not necessarily.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be, abusing him.
Yeah, I think that sounds more likely given what we know about Joffrey. That I think some of his actions did have kind of like when, for example, when he has Sansa have her dress ripped off in front of him, that there's shades of sexual violence, but he didn't live long enough for it really to come to fruition. So that it could have gone in that direction for him, but he didn't live long, unfortunately. But we find out so much more about the Ironborn books, which I think was one of my favorite parts about Feast for Crows, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what are your guys' opinions on the Ironborn culture? I have to admit, I find them really sort of despicable and horrible to be around. I don't really enjoy the chapters. I mean, they're quite interesting. I think Euron's an interesting character, even only just because he's so loathsome. But being with these people is kind of not very enjoyable. They're very pious and arrogant, yet at the same time, just annoying and cruel at times. But I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts?
Again, they're gross, but I can't. Yeah, they're gross, but I can't look away. That's the way I'd.
Okay, so you're not fans. Do you just kind of enjoy the despicableness of them? I mean, there's sort of two characters I sort of enjoyed, which was the Reader, who kind of seems like one of the few of them with common sense, and I think Lord Blacktide. He seems to be one of the few non-warlike Ironborn, but the rest of them just seem sort of idiotic in their lust for blood, even to the point where they're happy to lose battles and just to fight. It's sort of, I mean, I almost sort of see their culture as almost like a plot hole in the story, because their sole objective is just to attack the mainland, and they pretty much attacked every major house along the western coast.
Their entire lifestyle depends on reading. That's their main income source. They can't grow anything. They can't, they have no other sources of income. What do? Well, they'll just manage to catch fish. That's all they can do. So everything else has to come from the mainland, and they have no concept of buying.
Yeah, I mean,
they just take.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Their economy is entirely based on stealing from other people. So you're right, they can't grow. So they've developed this whole culture of, stealing from people who can make things and grow things. And I just don't understand why a lord hasn't risen up.
Money.
Basically
giving something valuable in exchange for something else. They just, steal the iron price that basically take it from somebody.
Well, I think they probably would have developed the concept of money if they had any money or anything of value to trade, but they don't. So they've just developed this concept of taking from other people and apply this kind of manifest destiny, divine nature to it. So they can justify stealing from people who do actually make things and work hard to make things. And I just don't understand how this culture has existed, at least for the past, 300 years. Like, especially after Robert's Rebellion. Like, why was Aeron Greyjoy allowed to continue to be Lord of the Iron Islands? Why wasn't he executed or sent to the wall? It's just bizarre that his only punishment that his son was taken hostage, and then they were just left to their own devices again to rebel in another 10 years or whatever. It's just, I don't know why. Especially with Tywin. Tywin is the most vengeful lord ever, considering what he did to the Tarbex and the Reigns.
Jon Arryn was.
Yeah, but the Greyjoys burnt the Lannister fleet in Anchor. I can't imagine Tywin was going to forgive that. They should have. They should have just.
No, okay, you just finish your point and then I'll...
Sorry, I'm just raging against the Ironborn. I just thought they should...
I have an interesting question. They don't have trees, they can't grow anything, right? So how do they build ships? Do they steal the trees as well?
Maybe.
They don't have... I don't think
they probably have some,
trees,
don't they?
But enough to build so many ships? I mean, just the Iron Fleet has 100 ships. And they have others as well, right? And these are pretty small islands. So where do they get the wood? I mean, a lot of ships in the Iron Fleet, I think, are ships that Victarion has captured. But they must have started somewhere, right? They had a fleet even before. They must have had a fleet before they started capturing other ships, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they have enough wood or timber on the lands to make a couple of ships, and then I guess, they just raid from the neck, from the woods on the coast, and eventually to other ships. Yeah. Ships out of Lannisport and Old Town, they just take a couple here and there and just use the wood to build more ships and more and more and more until they have about 200 of them. Yeah. I mean, I quite enjoy the concept of their culture on paper, like hearing about them from other places, especially in the first book. I was like, I want to meet these guys. But once you actually meet them, they're pretty horrible to be around. I was sort of into the idea of Theon going to seek out an alliance with the Ironborn because they seem like really hard fighters. But once you get there, it's like, I don't like these guys. And of course, they betray Robb and attack Winterfell. And then I hated them from then on.
And they must have known they couldn't keep the North. So what was the point?
I know, it's bizarre. Their confidence is unbelievable. I know, they think they can take over the Seven Kingdoms with just like willpower. It's crazy.
I mean, they don't have the population, they don't have the amount of soldiers just going, okay, so they managed to conquer it, but how are they going to keep it?
Yeah.
Because they believe in themselves, I guess.
I know. It's crazy. They have no plan beyond raiding and I mean, okay, they're good at ship warfare. That's their strength. But they have no talent for land combat. It's crazy that they would think they would be able to take inland castles and hold a castle like Winterfell. I mean, I suppose that was Theon's one-off decision. Balon was more interested in than Coast. And there's also this inherent cowardice to a lot of their fighting. I mean, they're constantly puffing themselves up as these great warriors and denouncing the Greenlanders as these weaklings. But ultimately, they're attacking fishing villages and mining towns and things like that. And when a real army turns up, they flee back into the sea with their plunder. I hate them.
Well, that's the whole concept of reaving, right? You just steal and run.
Yeah, but the sort of, all right, that's fine, but at least admit what you are. Don't go around saying you're the greatest warriors of all time and could conquer the Seven Kingdoms.
Well,
because
I think I was just going to say that I think the Ironborn are intrinsically very, very hypocritical as a culture. They're just they're just a bunch of self-centered, despicable hypocrites, which is why I kind of love them. They're just so fun to watch bumble around.
Another question. This hatred for the Greenlanders and all must have been pretty recent, right? Because Aeron the Black, he was king of the Riverlands, right? And he was Ironborn. So he left the islands. He conquered. I think the Riverlands were in control of the Ironborn for a long time until Aegon arrived. So they must not. This might have been a more recent. I don't know. I don't know what to call it, but maybe. Because they obviously had control of the Riverlands for a long time. Maybe after Aegon the Conqueror defeated them and they were driven back to the islands, maybe that's when they developed this hate for the Greenlanders, because they were pretty willing to go and live there before.
Yeah, I think it's very much a culture in decline. As you say, they once were enormously powerful kings. I mean, I think they held the Riverlands for like 500 years. They held all along the coast up to the neck, parts of the Westerlands even. But since Aegon's landing, they've been pushed back into basically nothing. All they have is those couple of islands with like no resources whatsoever. So I think they're still hanging on to this idea that they're a great empire, but ultimately they're just not very powerful. They have the confidence and the arrogance, but not the power, not the men or the resources, I guess.
And it seems strange that they have. Well, they're so fickle that they elect Euron as the king just because he says, "Oh, I've got this magical horn that can bind dragons together," which sort of reminded me of like high school elections and like the person wanting to be class president says, "Oh, if you vote for me, I'll build a swimming pool in the school." And they're so stupid that they do it.
But Euron's strategies have been quite successful so far.
I think it's also a testament to desperation of these people, the fact that they are in decline, that they would just go so whole hog into, hey, he's going to get us dragons, yay! And like they don't even really think about how the fact that Euron has been gone for so long and he's really this unknown character to them, even though he's one of their countrymen, and Asha has a great reputation. It seems like maybe she's not universally beloved, but people hold her in pretty high esteem. And the fact that they just throw her over and in favor of this big, shiny object, basically. I think it really does show the desperation underlying all this, bluster and bravado.
Yeah, he's puffed himself up to be exactly what all of these other people think of themselves as Iron Islanders. Asha is definitely the more logical choice. I mean, she lays out a pretty good plan for them in which they'll get parts of the north for themselves, like as actual territory. But they don't want to hear it. They call it a Craven's Peace. Yeah, they call it a Craven's Peace. They just have this bloodlust. They just want to fight.
That's what Euron's going to give to them.
Yeah, that's what takes.
And they probably don't really fear somebody coming and taking over their islands. Seriously, want there.
That's right. I think that's probably what saved them. They're such poor islands that nobody's bothered to take.
That's probably why they spared Aeron Greyjoy, because nobody actually wanted to live there and rule instead.
Brilliant.
But that's all that I had to say on Aeron.
About Naga's bones. Are they really the bones of a kraken or something else?
A dragon, wasn't it? A sea dragon.
Yeah, Naga.
So what's a sea dragon? Is it a kraken? Is it something else?
I read that as being something else. It was not a kraken, strictly speaking. It was probably more of a traditional sea serpent as we think of. But they definitely believe in krakens.
Yeah, well, we've heard reports of Krakens. I think Tyrion, Varys, relayed some reports of Krakens attacking off the coast in book. So maybe there's one out there hanging around.
Yeah, but we don't yet know if that is some kind of weird analogy for the Ironborn, or if they truly are Krakens. It's part of the whole theme in the books of magic, encroaching more and more on the overall storyline, I think.
Anyone else have any other points?
I thought it was interesting that the first Aeron chapter, it seems to take place like halfway in 3, almost. Like the news of Balon's death occurs. Rob receives that in book halfway between 3 before the Red Wedding, and we see that here. So sort of interesting chronology that starts.
Yeah, it takes him a long time to come around. And Euron's been there for some time, right? He's been consolidating his power even before Dampere calls it the King.
I did read the Kingsmoot storyline was planned to be in A Storm of Swords.
But there was just too much else to put in there. That makes sense.
Yeah. It might actually work for season 4 of the TV show if they decide to do it.
I'm really curious to see if they work in. I mean, we've already sort of seen Aeron, but he wasn't named as Aeron. They had an actor standing in that role, and I would love to see Victarion and Euron on screen. That would make me so happy. Especially Victarion for some reason, because God, he's such a jerk. But
yeah, he's the worst.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know Nadia would know this from one of our other podcasts, or maybe you guys would do it as well. That I run I run a Hannibal podcast, and just from looking at like the fan casting stuff, it seems like a lot of fans think that Mads Mikkelsen would make a really good Victarion or Euron, and it's like
I want him to be Roose Bolton. I want him to be Aeron Greyjoy. All those sort of cruel characters, coldly cruel characters. He would make a great...
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, he's busy with Hannibal. Like, obviously, he has time to do other things because he has like 2 other movies coming out this year. So it would just tickle me pink to have him show up in 2 of my fandoms pretty much simultaneously. Let's see.
So what do we think that Aeron's plan is to bring down Euron? I mean, we hear in Ash's chapter that he kind of disappeared after the Kingsman. Like any sort of speculation on what his plan is?
Nope.
No, yeah, bit of a mystery. I mean, I think on one of the, I think it was WonderCon, George actually offered to read out one of 2 chapters, an Aeron chapter and what was the other one? The Dornish princess.
Ariane.
That's right.
Ariane, that's it. I had a blank. Yeah, and everyone chose Ariane, but yeah, maybe we'll get a bit more on that later down the track.
I think
but he said it was pretty twisted. That was regarding the
That's
Aeron
right.
chapter. We might see more of Euron's role in childhood.
Yeah, I do remember that now, and I definitely that him sort of alluding to, guys, this is pretty dark, or do you want the other chapter? And I feel like the other chapter. So I think we have some, we're finally going to hear the background of his hatred for Euron and what the creaking door really means.